Everyone.
Yeah, good. Nice to have you here.
And you are calling in from where?
I'm calling in from Houston.
No wonder, that's why you've got daylight in India.
Sunlight. That's right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
will-
it's coming up to 8:20 in the morning.
Okay, so that's a great time. Uh, a little early for Sunday, of course, in the US. But
No, I think the emotional attachment to PBWA and obviously to the Durga Puja, trumps that. But yes, otherwise it is a bit early. But delighted to be here and delighted to see everyone here.
thank you.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's
So,
true of everybody, especially the two bankers over here, both Anup and Arijit. For
Right.
them, I'm sure you know Sundays are very precious days because
Oh,
most of
yes.
the Sundays they are working as well. Fact that they are giving that up, that just underlines the nostalgia that they have.
Yeah, but for Bangali, pujo is
Puja is puja.
overshadows everything else.
that's a great sense. So let me introduce all of you. I think Rajiv is also there. You must be. Rajiv, you know that during this Pujo days, Durga Puja days, so we have this session in Ashtami day normally. And all the panelists that you were seeing here, they have been a part of it earlier years. So this year we are doing it virtually, and this would be streamed on Ashtami Day again. And Navaratri has started, so you can see each one of them are here. So I'm just waiting for Mr.
No, Saurav, you don't have to tell me anything about pujos. I'm a Calcutta boy.
Oh, good, good.
Up in Calcutta.
That is fantastic.
Yeah,
More loyal than the king.
yeah. I'm a student of Lamatnia Boys, Calcutta. I did my entire
Oh,
schooling
God.
in Calcutta.
Ah,
I'm a thorough born bred Purnadas Road boy. So you don't need any. As my father keeps reminding me, you're a South Indian. My name. Bengali is the only language I can speak, read, and write. I can't write. Malayalam, which is supposed to be my native, or Tamil, or any of the South Indian languages. I mean,
So I think we
Rajgopal
largely have
is
an
only
attitude to keep switching to.
my father's name that I carry, but otherwise, my roots are all in Calcutta. So no, don't worry.
Nice.
So I think we have the luxury to kind of switch on to Bengali for a couple of sentences for sure. I think
No problem.
only Dr. Hirandani will be probably the one left out, but nonetheless,
yeah, and of course,
for the bigger group.
Sari and Mr. Hiranandani, yes, both of them. Great. So I'll just call because he's unable to join. Mr. Hiranandani said, let me just mute myself for a while. Let me just call him.
So is
In fact-
is there going to be live streaming of the pujo this time?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Praditi, what we're doing is, the rituals is as it is. So rituals will be the only thing which will be physically present on the ground. And we'll kind of, live shoot it and live telecast it throughout the day. So it's going to be about, 18 hours of video, which is kept on. What we're doing is we are putting it on live on YouTube as well as on Facebook. At the same time, it's also on the local cable. So if you kind of, if one goes into my website, the social media handles are connected to my website. So immediately kind of, it links on. At the same time, what we're doing is we're also going to be sharing a QR code. If you press the QR code, it takes you directly to our pujo. So that's the plan. Other than that, the other things like a bit of a cultural event by members who've kind of, done some programs from home, recitation songs, some natok, etc. is all, and some children's program, of course, is what we are going to also stream. Other than that, the usual Bengali adda, which will kind of have, and topics like, Shomitra versus Uttam Kumar, and things like Bahar versus Goirakum. There are a few themes which we are going to also actively throw out there, and we'll have a bunch of people we're talking about. Tachana, what we're also doing is we also will have a souvenir which we have every year. We're printing a souvenir as well, albeit again on digital form. And what's encouraging is people's creative juices have really flowed. So the souvenir actually looks much thicker than usual days with content from the members.
Great, wonderful. So do share the links with us.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah. And this will also be available in Tata Sky Anand Darshan.
Okay, great, wonderful. And also the link for the chada, because otherwise how the hell do we send you anything?
Yes. We also have a QR code for the same. So we don't want you to go through the NEFT route.
Right.
So that's something we will share as well.
Okay, great, wonderful.
So I was just remarking.
Hi, Sari. Welcome here.
Hi, Sari.
Good that you could finish your earlier assignment quickly. So we'll start. Mr. Hiranandani is just joining in. He had some problem joining in. Now he is just joining in 2 minutes, and then we will just start here.
So while we're waiting, so I was just remarking that Arijit's a familiar face. He was there for the first event that we did way back in 2015.
Yes. You were
That's
there,
right.
yeah.
And my wife told me that what the hell are you doing there? There should be ladies up there, and you are speaking on women's empowerment, all men. So at least we are very happy that there are two ladies, Mrs. Bhattacharya and Mrs. Chah this time. I got a big bagging after being on that platform. I think 1 year we did not have too many ladies.
That's
So
right.
You are not qualified at all to speak on women's empowerment. And then I could not fully disagree.
Absolutely. In fact, I remember that day. NDTV was showing there, and then Nidhi Rajdan was questioning from there. It was live in NDTV, and she was pointing that a lot of men. I'm not seeing any woman there. That was the only year that we had almost all men. Maybe only one lady was there, but it was So this year at least we have two.
Further, we have Dr. Hirani as well. So
good evening.
And
Namaskar,
welcome.
everybody.
Yeah, namaskar.
This is Bhattacharya. I'm seeing you after a long time.
Yes, and you're looking fitter than ever. You're looking really good.
Thank you. All of you. And lovely namaskar to all of you. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be with you.
Same here.
Same here. So let's start. So we have all the panelists here. So first of all, a warm welcome to all of you. And during this Durgotsav, and we have this sessions, especially for our women empowerment initiative called Mission Swayam Siddha. So that, Devi Durga is the epitome of women empowerment. So there cannot be any better day than we can have these discussions. So we have Mr. Sukanti Ghosh will be moderating this session, and Shantanu will be taking you through a bit about our organization, and then we'll start the discussions. Over to Shantanu.
Thank you, Saurabh. Thank you. I think we obviously have some of us who've kind of visited our Pujo at the past. So some of what we talk about the association may be a bit of a repeat. So bear with me on that. And once again, a very good evening and best wishes for Durgotsav for this August panel. Well, from our reading of our invitation, you may now have some appreciation of PBWA, but allow me a few minutes to speak about the spirit of our association. So what seemed like a meeting of minds in 2006 is now an organization of depth and character based on positive, the positivity different, making a positive difference to our society. Over the last 15 years, our organization has made, steady inroads into the issues concerning the well-being of women, improving healthcare, education for the underprivileged, and rural community development. One of our sustained initiatives or engagements of PBWA has been in village adoption. So we're working with a couple of villages in a place called Tarasari in Johar district, where it is in intense poverty and has the maximum malnutrition deaths. Some of the things that we worked on here is things like providing daily breakfast for the school, education, water management, infrastructure development. Along with this, of course, in the Mumbai metropolitan area, we have intense engagements in the causes connected to the management of Delhi diseases, working with street children, destitute girls, and really not so fortunate, not so fortunate friends from the sex worker and the LGBT community. Some of us are aware that during the COVID times, PBW in a modest way has supported a couple of very noble initiatives. So we work with the organization called CanKids. CanKids works for children affected with cancer. So we kind of provided safety gears for the children. We provided food stuff for Mantralaya staff, and we've been working relentlessly to make for the cause the well-being of the city. We assisted medical staff from Kama Hospital and JJ Hospital. And we've been continuously providing food and facilities and provisions for our Mission Swayak Siddha trainees. Along with this, of course, we want to be topical, we want to be recent. So PBW and its members have also generously contributed to the Amphan cyclone. Amphan cyclone, as you would know, hit West Bengal, especially Sundarbans, in a big way, and there was complete destruction. So PBW and its members really contributed to that. Now let me speak about something which is more closer to home as we speak, and that's really about Mission Swayak Siddha. Mission Swayak Siddha is the flagship initiative of Powai Bengali Welfare Association, and its endeavor to empower women to unleash their creativity that really remains dormant because of lack of opportunity and use of the productive use the same. We founded this organization in 2007. The dream of empowerment has now become a reality for 100 women in the last 13 years that we've been operating, and really MSS as a facilitator has transformed the lives, which is in an immeasurable way. The genesis of PBW, as you understand, has seeped to the intentions to bring about a positive change, and we are very committed. And we have very committed base of members and well-wishers who've been consistently encouraging us and helping us to move forward. That being said, let's also talk about what is Durgotsav. So as PBW completes its 15th year, PBW's Durga Puja and its scale and magnitude has really grown exponentially. PBW Powai Sarvajanin Durgotsav is now a marquee event in the cultural calendar of Mumbai, and we have at least 1 million visitors which come and visit us every year. Now that being said, what's important? What's important is at the heart of this grand event, there still lies the resolute and commitment from us to make the world around a much better place to live. And and really today's discussion is our commitment and your signature of the endorsement of this purpose. A lot to learn, really, a long way to go. And we have the firm view, really, if we can kind of really share a few moments of our happiness in our daily lives to the people who are not so privileged, I think we can make a huge difference. So I think about largely about our association and PB Durgotsav. Let me kind of stop here. Let me kind of hand it over to Mr. Sukanti Ghosh. Sukanti is our moderator for this evening. He is an active associate of PBWA professionally. Sukanti is a senior vice president at Albright Stonebridge Group, the world's premier corporate diplomacy firm, and he leads the South Asia practice. Prior to ASG, Mr. Ghosh was leading the India operations before he moved to Houston with the same organization. He serves the National Executive Board of American Chamber of Commerce, which we know as really AmCham in India. All that being said, Sukanti is an active, he's a prolific writer across the mainstream and business newspaper honor. Sukanti, let me pass this on to you into your capable hands to introduce the panel and really take the discussion forward. Over to you, Sukanti.
Thank you, and very much a passionate member of PBWA and a passionate member of Powai Bengali Welfare Association. So I'm one of those professional nomads that you typically come across. I think what's so special, what's special for me is I was part of the team that originally conceived of this event and put it together in 2015. So it's a proud privilege to be back here, after several years, and it's wonderful to see all of you here. Given the fact that we're doing this virtually, when we were planning the event, we decided, and so it sets the scene for the discussion, and we'll move on from there. So Anindo, if you would please start recording. Good evening, everyone. Sorry, go ahead. Great. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to PBWA's CEO Power Walk and Talk 2020. It's wonderful to see all of you. Without going into too many detailed introductions, I would like to point out that we have an extremely august panel of speakers with us here today. Amongst them, in alphabetical order, are Mr. Anup Bagchi, who's Executive Director on the board of ICICI Bank. He also heads the ICICI Foundation of Inclusive Growth, and he's a member of RBI's, the Reserve Bank of India's Expert Committee on Micro, Small and Medium Scale Enterprises. Mr. Bagchi, welcome. We have Mr. Arijit Basu, who's Managing Director, Commercial Credit and IT at State Bank of India. He also has an additional charge of the Stressed Assets Resolution Group. Prior to his current position, he was the CEO and MD and non-independent executive director at SBI Life Insurance Company. Mr. Basu, welcome again. With us here, we also have Mrs. Arundhati Bhattacharya, who's the chairperson and CEO of Salesforce in India. I think most of us know Mrs. Bhattacharya from her amazing stint as the chairperson of the State Bank of India, when she's credited with upscaling the bank's technology initiatives to give the 212-year-old, national bank a digital edge and modernizing it in ways that are simply outstanding. It's for no reason that, no small reason that Mrs. Bhattacharya has been called out and has been awarded by Forbes as 25th in their list of most powerful women in the world, and the 5th most powerful woman in finance in 2016. Mrs. Bhattacharya, it's a pleasure to have you here. With us here, and it's very gracious of you, Mr. Hiranandani, to join us here today. As the Powai Bengali Welfare Association, as you can imagine, we have a special relationship with you. We're very glad that you could join us here today. For those who do not know Mr. Hiranandani is an Indian billionaire entrepreneur. He's the co-founder and managing director of the Hiranandani Group. He's perhaps one of the most visible names in India's real estate business. And he's also on India's list of billionaires noted by Forbes. But I think, what is special to Mr. Hiranandani, if I may speak on his behalf, is his extreme passion for social work, his passion for community upliftment. And that's reflected in the work that he does with colleges, schools, hospitals, right around Bombay and around the country. So Mr. Hiranandani, welcome. We have Mr. Rajiv Rajgopal, who's the Managing Director, ASCO Nobel India. As some of you know, most of you know, I'd hope, ASCO Nobel is one of the world's leading, if not the leading paint company and company that focuses on decorative surfaces. And Mr. Rajgopal, it's a pleasure to have you here. Prior to joining ASCO Nobel, he was the CEO Broadband and Data at Airtel India. And he's had a career that's taken him across various geographies around the world. And last but not the least, I'd have to welcome a dear friend, Sairi Chahal, who's the CEO of She-Rose. She-Rose, as some of you know, but I hope most of you will get to know before the end of the program, is a community platform for women, which offers support, resources, opportunities, and interactions for young women entrepreneurs. She has set up and supported, upwards of 1 million women through this platform, and she hopes to impact close to 100 million women in the next 5 years. Sairi is part of the Aspen Leadership Network, and in her free time, and I say free time completely tongue-in-cheek, she sits on the board of Paytm. Panelists, it's wonderful to have you here, and we're all honored to be in your company. Moving to the concept of the talk, when we were planning today's session, we were all besieged by one thought, and if you'd allow me, I'd spend a couple of minutes talking about that before I turn it over to you for questions. Today, we're all living through one of the worst pandemics the world has ever seen. few of us would have thought in early March that 7 months down the line, we would still be fighting an invisible enemy. One which has attacked over 39 million people the world over and has left in excess of 1.1 million people dead. Even as we all wait patiently for a vaccine, an effective therapy, or even a miracle to happen, there's no denying that COVID-19 has changed the world for us as we know it. 2020 will go down in the history of mankind as a year with no end. One where, despite everyone's best efforts, over 7.4 million people have been infected in India, leaving well over 100,000 people dead. And while there is enough and more reason to cheer, as we recognize the bravery and courage of our frontline health workers who are nursing more and more people back to health every day, it is equally important to recognize those who have stepped up to the plate to keep our essential services running, provided us with the ability to serve food on our tables, have a roof over our heads, and to work seamlessly from home. Most of all, we're thankful to those who are striving day in and day out to ensure that we do not plunge into chaos as cities and countries around the world. But I think as even we, as a global community, pledge to join hands to build back better, it's important that we remember those who are not as fortunate as we are. People who are at risk of being left behind. And today's discussion is focused on just that. Taking a moment to remember those who could be left behind and to ensure that we're all aligned in our efforts to beat this pandemic together. So on that grim note, and at the same time, hopeful note, I'm going to call upon Mr. Hiranandani to begin with. As somebody, Mr. Hiranandani, as somebody who's been deeply involved in urban planning in India and in designing the face of the India of tomorrow, the India we live in, how would you say we fared in caring for the millions of our people, our brethren, who had come to our cities from villages, from the inner cities, to be part of our metropolises, and who've had to go back under really difficult conditions?
Thank you very much. I'm so delighted to be a part of the Powai Bengali Welfare Association for so many years. And it's certainly a delight to be here and join your panel this today. It's a delight. And also to be amongst illustrious people on this panel. The world has completely changed, as you have correctly, Mr. Ghosh, pointed out. And this paradigm has really taken the worst in terms of it. The migrant workers in this country have had to walk back 1,000 kilometers while we had trains parked in the yards. We had buses in the depots and people still walked 1,000 kilometers. The richest city in the country, Mumbai, has more than 50% of its population living in slums. Not necessary that they should be there. Many of them have paid good amounts to stay there. And if you had actually built buildings of the sizes and shapes that were there, we would have done it. So there has been a lot of unfairness, injustice in terms of the treatment of people that have taken place in this pandemic and even otherwise, whether it is a situation which we need to do, and it's very correct to flag off all the negative issues to do. But on the other hand, look at the positive issues. Look at the fact that maybe 3 or 4 years ago, the 4 CEOs of Indian banks, including Mrs. Bhattacharya, were women in this country. So when we talk about women's emancipation, India has certainly led the way. If you look at the Prime Minister and President of India, we've had one before the United States of America has a woman president. We have had prime ministers and we have had people in leadership position in this country. So there has been something special about India, but still a long way to go in order to save our situation in terms of injustice, impropriety, and other things that we need to make unlifted. However, I think the important fact will be that we have to cater for one and for all, and for the girl power and the women power that we really need to do to bring back this equality in the society. I think we must keep focusing it, flagging it off, and keep reminding ourselves how can we do better. So injustice, yes. Negativism, yes. But the future holds good. I still believe in it.
Thank you, Mr. Hiranandani. If I can ask you a bit of a follow-up question. So if, as you look towards continuing to build out India and you look towards urban planning in general, what are your thoughts about how our cities should be shaped so that people are not forced to go through the hardships they had to go through this time around?
Leadership?
I
think leadership needs to be more thought-oriented and professional in their approach. The initial lockdown was correct because we didn't know what, as you said, this insidious virus, how it would reach anybody, and everybody was not known. So the lockdown was right. But the second stage of operation, where thousands and thousands of millions of people walk back home, the non-opening out, people stay in Virar and Vasai and all, the middle class, lower middle class. They've not been able to come to work. They've not been able to afford to travel this situation. The injustice which is taking them, where the railways are not able to do it and other issues are concerned, the economic injustice which is happening to people in this country is horrendous. It's just unbelievable. Yes, maybe the intention is good, but at the bottom level, it's not really working. We really need to do much more for the people of our country in order to bring it back to normal. Look at that story which came out just this morning that I was seeing on the print. We talk about Bangladesh, which is now growing faster, and the GDP of Bangladesh is close and slightly overtaking the per capita GDP of India. The per capita GDP of Bangladesh this year, by next year, will cross India. Only 20 years ago, they were 50 years behind. Today, they are equal, and next year, they will be ahead of us. So I do feel that there is a lot more that we can possibly do in order to see that our country really moves forward in a more progressive way for every segment of the society. It's not for you and me alone. It's for every segment of society that we really need to do. And the issue is we can do it. Whether it is urban planning, whether it is fiscal position or giving jobs and getting equanimity in terms of social economic equality, it can happen. And this country is ready for it. But I think there is something lacking in the leadership that really does not make it happen at the pace at which you are.
Thank you, Mr. Hiranandani. If I can just move the conversation forward and call upon Mr. Bagchi. You know, in addition to the migrant workers and you know, the difficulties they faced, I think, you know, there is another section of society that warrants calling out, and that is the MSME sector. And if you look at the micro, small, and medium scale industry sector in India, and if you look at their plight, if you look at the fact that, you know, the sector together contributes to over 30% of the national GDP and employs over 40% of the people, how would you say they fared through this pandemic? And you know, obviously, we know and we've seen governments around the world try and do as much as they can in terms of providing stimulus packages to them. Do you think enough has been done, or is there more that we could do together?
So thank you, Mr. Ghosh, and you are absolutely right that you know, the MSME is the link between the pure consumer retail end and then you have the larger corporate end. So there has to be a bridge between the two, and that is what MSME provides in a sense. And this pandemic has been very, very sort of bad for them for simple reasons that there are three issues that MSMEs face. The first big issue is that of payments. So when we were doing our study at RBI and, you know, with of course ministry representation there were essentially three different issues that MSME faces. Number one issue that they face is not, ironically, it's not payments. Payments is a big issue. I would say almost contributing 40% of the issue. But the big issue they face is the risk management issue. Okay, and the key man risk issue. And the other issue that they really face is this whole issue about, lack of and supporting ecosystem, which makes them very vulnerable to shocks. So at a retail end, actually people are not so vulnerable to shocks. At a corporate end, they have their own balance sheets, etc., which makes them less vulnerable to shocks. It's in the middle that they are vulnerable to shocks. And in a financial term, what happens is lack of liquidity will immediately sort of have a very, very deep impact on them, which is not true, for either a large corporate or a small retail or a consumer. And so what happened in this is suddenly when the demand contracted, you have a situation where there is no payment coming in, your demand has contracted, so you have nobody to sell to, and you have a cost which is fixed in nature. So what do you do in such a situation? And I must say that, while initially government didn't sort of move as fast, but after the credit guarantee scheme, I think it was a very, very well thought out scheme, and people really benefited from the credit guarantee scheme. And now as we see, so I think the darkest days were April and May. These were really the darkest days. After that, I think light has started to come to that sector. Some sectors are quite down and out, and naturally, where it has got to do with mobility, where it has got to do with people, congregations, etc. But now we are seeing supply chains coming back. We are seeing, tolls almost at pre-COVID level. We are seeing even passenger vehicles moving at around 80% of the pre-COVID levels. It is coming back, and with credit guarantee schemes, I think it is getting supported a little bit on the MSME side. But overall, I feel that even without COVID, pre-COVID also, there was vulnerability in that segment. So it is not, of course, COVID had a devastating impact on them, but pre-COVID also, the resilience of the sector itself was always low. And from that perspective, while we will do quick fixes by way of credit guarantee schemes, other things, overall we have to increase the resilience of that sector. And resilience of the sector essentially comes from risk management, market linkage, and I would say credit linkage. So credit itself, is just a supporting function. So while, all eyes are always on the bankers and on the finance ministry and everybody, that how have you supported them? Actually, it is just one part of the chain. Essentially, the chain has to be very, very strong support on the market linkage and very strong support on the skill linkage, and very, very, tight focus on risk management. And I would say that, the German model is something that needs to be, or I would say overall European model, but certainly the German model needs to be studied and emulated, where there is a very large ecosystem, because it's also a big supporter of jobs. And so this is not something that one can wish away in any country, and certainly a country as large as ours, you always require linkages between that. So skilling and looking at that, model, a German model and a European model, is something that we must certainly look forward. Second, one thing which is outside of the definition of MSME are the traders, who are also in a way a lubricant in an economy. So, they are outside the MSME definition. Traders also are something that needs to be, strengthened. And when we strengthen the traders, you also decrease the friction in the economy and make sure that the distribution becomes better. But from an MSME perspective, resilience is something that we need to be improved, because if you look at an overall stress in the sector, and this is the publicly available data, the NPA levels are quite high. Even at the lowest level, it at 18%, but as you go higher, it is almost at 17%. And naturally, as a banker, it is difficult to support a sector where NPA levels are so high, because if your capital adequacy itself is not so high. So, it's very difficult to support all MSME sectors. But I would say that we need a slightly more structural support to the sector by way of ecosystem support. But this pandemic, just to quote some numbers, all the frequency indicators that are coming up, it is coming back quite sharply. And except for 8 to 10% of the economy, I would say that the balance 90% of the economy will be almost at 80% to 90%. And in some sectors are above, 100% of the economy. So from that perspective, I think there is certainly light at the end of the tunnel. And I have been personally extremely sort of inspired by the resilience of this sector and the way they have sort of brought down their cost structure, the way they have changed their whole methods of working, the way they have brought in efficiency. I think the resilience of this sector is something to be really saluted for, and they will be back, and they are coming back. I can quote you about our bank. We are a large player in that sector. The credit summation, which is inflow into the accounts, in most sectors are coming back to near COVID levels, and they are behaving quite well in that sector. There is certainly a section which is deeply impacted and would require more support, which I'm sure banks are giving, and restructuring is also on the way, so that will also happen. But overall, I think they have, I would say, largely come out now. If you take out the darkest days of April and May.
Thank you, Mr. Bagchi. That's a wonderfully positive note. And on that note, I'm going to shift it to Mr. Basu. But staying with, and I thank you for talking about the traders. And let me just pitch that to Mr. Basu. Mr. Basu, if you think about your erstwhile role in insurance, I'm going to stay there for a little while. And if you really look at the trader community, there are over 70 million traders in India. And if you look at this large trader community, it's, I'm sure we'll all agree, we're talking about key risks with the key person. We're talking about, so thin management teams, thinner balance sheets, low access to capital, large numbers of people, no business continuity planning, and most importantly, seriously underinsured. There's little or no insurance cover for that sector, either on the life side or the health side. Now there is maybe, but definitely not on the business interruption side. Do you see, given the fact that this may not be our last pandemic, do you see an opportunity for the government and the trader community to come together along with organizations like yourselves to provide some kind of insurance cover, some kind of risk cover to this large swathe of people who employ so many people around the country?
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. Firstly, I would like to thank Powai Durgotsav Welfare Association for having me here for the third time. It's a privilege to be with such august people. And this time it's really different because of COVID. And it's good that we are deliberating certain very important issues, which will impact us not only till COVID is there, but will stretch much beyond that. Before I come and address these specific questions on traders and insurance, I'd just like to add a few things to what Mr. Bagchi said. And I think he also alluded to the ecosystem for MSMEs. I think he very rightly pointed out that the solution to the MSME problem lies in having a very viable ecosystem, which is a challenge across the world. It's not a phenomenon confined to India, but because we are a poor country, with things like COVID happening, it really impacts them very intensely. But I think a few things have happened in India, which hopefully will take things forward in a positive manner. One is the adoption of digital and technology, which will enable us to link MSMEs to the supply chain and the marketplace. And already there are a lot of developments which are happening. Fintechs have come into the space. Bankers are very eagerly looking forward to it. And I think all the major banks, including SBI, we would like to get associated. And most of us have plans of having this kind of an ecosystem where the MSMEs are seamlessly able to link to the larger value chain, which comprises the corporates and finally the end consumer. And we have a special responsibility in SBI because our founding as SBI goes back to 1955, and we were the first to come up with anything for, say, a small scale industry and SME. So this were just my initial thoughts on the entire MSME sector, and really difficult days ahead. But if we get things right, and because this is a program which is meant for Mission Swayam Siddha, I was reading, and that is a source of special worry for us. I think women are likely to get very deeply impacted, and they already have been, more disproportionately. And I understand that the micro units at the ground level, we do a lot of lending through the self-help groups and things like that. They are much more adversely affected than the other micro or small scale units. And there is even a serious worry that whether girls will come back into school after the pandemic ends. But I'm sure that all of us together will address that as things open up, the government, the NGOs, and the entire system. On the insurance front, there is already products available, which is called, there is a Keyman insurance. In fact, in our bank, what we have been advocating, these are given by primarily the life insurance companies. And as you rightly said, most of the MSMEs will have, it will be a one person or at the most father and son or father and daughter kind of outfit. And it's extremely important that they do take an insurance. And I think all the insurance companies have such products. And the only challenge is that we need to explain. Because in India, unfortunately, what has happened so far is that insurance has been called what we call a pull product, rather a push product rather than a pull product. That is, the insurance companies go and say, no, this is good for you, and you buy it. But the value of the Keyman insurance is not very well understood. But efforts are being made now. I think the mutual fund industry did a wonderful job over the last 4 or 5 years by doing a campaign across the industry. There was a campaign which ran called Mutual Fund Sahi Hai. So in life insurance, I find that a similar campaign, that life insurance, Pehle life insurance, Sabse Pehle life insurance kind of focus. But what the pandemic has done, although not in the way that we would have desired, I think this need for insurance has now been felt. So there is a lot of reports that we are getting from our subsidiaries who are into both general and life insurance, that there is especially for healthcare products. And then the understanding that this does impact our business. And so we must have Keyman. And I'm sure, I think the only thing that we need to do again in insurance is make products as simple as possible. Sometimes when I was in life insurance, I used to feel that all the addendums that we have on the side, they were so complicated even for someone who was practicing inside, and to be able to explain that to the final consumer was a huge challenge. I think work is being done on that both by the regulator as well as by the companies. And let it be both the onboarding, that is getting the customer onboarded, should be seamless, digital process. And even the proof is that when there is need, these claims are very, very seamlessly paid. I think if insurance industry is able to come up with all these three things, a simple product, a digitized process, and ensure that they pay their claims quickly and on time, the trust that is there but needs to get enhanced will come back. And I'm sure that we need to go forward. But yes, I do agree. The other thing about traders that I'd like to mention before I finish is that the changes which the government had sought to bring, and maybe as of now, there has been a negative impact on the Indian economy. Two of the most important, as we all know in India, were the GST and the demonetization. Demonetization, I will not get into that debate right now. It does have its certain positives that we have seen in terms of taking people towards digital. But the GST environment, I think, has really helped the bankers. And many of our products across banks, in SBI, we have the government, as you know, has come up with a scheme called the Mudra scheme, which we realized was not working so seamlessly when we tried to do it in a non-digital mode. So we have in SBI rolled out something called an electronic or e-Mudra scheme, which is much more efficient. And this, to a large extent, draws in from this ecosystem where we are able to have data from the traders. So they also must understand the more transparent they are, the more with their information, the more they reach out to have a viable business model, the more they connect well with the ecosystem. Then the banks, as Mr. Bagchi said, will then get the confidence to be able to reach out and support them.
No, thank you. And if I may call upon Mrs. Bhattacharya, I've got a two-part question, starting with your earlier role and coming into your current role. So staying with the concept of insurance, and I promise not to labor the point, but just to be a bit provocative, $267 billion worth of stimulus packages have been, announced and handed out. Do you see scope for some kind of participative policy where the government contributes to part of the premium going to an insurance product for the MSMEs and our large 70 million trader community?
So first of all, thank you very much. Thank you to the Powai Bengali Welfare Association. Again, for me also, I think this is the third time I'm on this panel, but I thoroughly enjoy going to your pandals, and my Sharodiya Abhinandan and Shubhecha to all of your viewers and all the people who visit your pandals. On the theme of MSME, there are two or three things that I feel very strongly about. One of them is that I think, the structure, the financial structure of these companies, where their capital is very, very thin, that is what prevents them from having the resilience that Anup was talking about. India is a resource poor country. Most of the people who set up these MSMEs, they do so with loans taken from friends and relatives and people they know, but they are loans, they are not equity. And raising equity is very tough for these MSMEs, more so for women. For women, it's really, really a struggle, okay? And that is why you have so few women entrepreneurs. So unless and until the government also looks at that and tries to do something about the capital structure, tries to maybe create a corpus where you can get maybe a no interest loan for 15 years, which is quasi equity, something of that nature, unless it is done, it becomes very difficult for any of these small companies to withstand the business cycles that are bound to happen. The pandemic just is an extra bad business cycle, but business cycles of this kind, they keep coming, and all of these companies or all of these organizations, including the micro-organizations, they get badly impacted. The second thing that I think, we need to understand about the MSMEs is the need for big corporates as well as for the government to ensure that contracts are honored and people are paid on time. These are the people who actually, get squeezed by the delays that happen in paying up of bills. Now, this is something where I think all of India needs to improve its record. The record of not paying on time and trying and delaying as much as possible. There were ways out of this. During the time, I think that I was in the bank itself, we had set up, and the initiative came even before I became chairman. We had set up a platform called Threads, which allows most of these MSMEs to put their bills on the platform. The bills would be presented to the drawee of the bill, and they would have to accept or reject it within 30 days. And once it's accepted, it becomes whoever is the corporate or the government on which it is drawn, they become the risk. And therefore, this bill then is presented on the platform, and financiers, including banks and others, they can actually bid and discount the bill. And obviously, as a result of that, the traders get it, the traders or whoever we are talking about, the MSMEs, they get the discounting at the lowest possible interest, because it's literally, auctioned off. And the risk is no longer with the small guy, the risk is with the big guy, okay? Now, this is something which even means we've been pushing, at least during my time, I pushed it very, very hard to try and get every single organization, including the government, the quasi-government, the PSUs, and the large corporates all on this platform. It wasn't able. It even came in Mr. Arun Jaitley's speech, in the finance minister's budget speech, with a firm date by which time all PSUs would be on this platform. I don't think that there is that much of traffic on that platform even today. And I think, if these are certain things that would make the ease of business for all of the smaller entities much, much better and much, much easier. especially during bad times. I think, we need to look at many such little things in order to ensure that we are creating an infrastructure, creating an environment which nurtures the MSMEs properly. Again, you know the reason for that. Their ecosystem is very strong. They are the largest job provider. But what is it that we are trying to make them, stronger? What are the specific steps that we are taking in order to make them stronger? So while the suggestion that you gave that maybe the government could add a little bit onto the premium, that would obviously be something that the government should look at. They have already been doing that in respect of things like Ayushman Bharat and making a big difference there in health insurance. This is also definitely something in business disruption of small enterprises. If they step in on this, I'm sure, it is something that would be a very progressive steps. But I think, the major things that are required is capital. The major things that are required is payments on time. So all of these things, I think, they will play a part towards actually empowering our MSMEs. But having said that, let me also tell you something. I am really and truly surprised at the number of MSME conversations that we as a company, and this is my present company, Salesforce, is having. We have about 2,700 connections in India, including about 450 NGOs. Okay. But out of that, let me tell you, more than 2/3 are MSMEs. So to think that the MSMEs are all backward, that they don't understand digital, that they're not going in for the latest technology, that's not true at all. There are a lot of young entrepreneurs out over there who are really and truly leveraging on today's technology in order to improve their way of working. And therefore, what it really needs is, as I said, that helping hand. What it really needs is for people to be able to understand that this is an entrepreneur who's honest, who's going to work hard, and therefore, we can take a risk with them. And maybe that initial risk may be something that the government needs to take rather than expect the private sector to do it. Believe me, within 2 to 3 years, if they prove good, the private sector will take over everything. And the government can then go on to the next set of entrepreneurs. So I think, there is a lot that can be done for this sector, no doubt at all about it. And I think it's time we started doing quite a bit of it. However, having said that, technology is still playing another big part. And very recently, the India stack, as you know, which comprises of the UID layer, the UPI layer, all of that is there. So they have recently come with certain credit rails, which are called Sahai. And this is for small values, small tenure loans, where again, people can put in their bills and, there will be lenders on the other end who will actually, provide the financing. And the way the lenders will assess it would be on the basis of the fact that this particular rails will provide you very rich data to enable you to really underwrite the risk and know at what level you need to be able to lend to these people. So these credit rails have just become available, and I know that there are a lot of institutions which are going to build apps on top of it, just like people built on top of UPI. And I'm very hopeful that credit will become far more easily available to this set of people at least.
Thank you, Mr. Bhattacharya. That was amazing. Just moving on, Mr. Rajgopal, to you, and staying on the subject of technology. If there's one thing that the pandemic has proven, without a doubt, it's the centrality of technology and the importance that technology plays in our lives, be it around digital commerce, be it around banking, be it around telemedicine, be it around entertainment, be it around education. So I'd love to hear your views in terms of, particularly as someone who's lived and worked in various countries around the world and sought higher education from various institutions around the world. How do you think the education piece has changed in India or needs to change in India, particularly given the fact that if you go deeper and deeper into the country, there is a crisis, and despite the efforts of organizations like the one that you've been a part of in the past, there is still room to grow. So we'd love to hear your thoughts in that area, please.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. I'd like to sort of thank all the members of the Bengali Welfare Association and Powai for firstly having me. This is my first opportunity to interact with all of you, and glad to be a part of this illustrious panel. Very pertinent question, Mr. Ghosh, and of course, it's been a while since I've sort of worked in Airtel, but I'll just give you my 2 bits, having run the business on data and broadband. Firstly, the penetration of broadband in India has been led by the mobile penetration. Yeah, so it's not the fixed line penetration. I looked after both parts of the business. The fixed line penetration is barely double digit, but it's the mobile broadband penetration which is sort of accelerated with the launch of 4G, and more importantly, with a competitor driving the acceleration in the space. Yeah. But if you were to ask me, it's still very early steps. I mean, look, in a country like India, the penetration of broadband is roughly about 45 to 50% even now. Yeah. Compare that to a country like China, where the penetration of broadband is almost 95%. Now you can imagine the shift you're talking about in terms of what it does to education, to MSMEs, to women. To me, the first thing that I learned when I started handling the business is broadband access to data is one of the greatest levelers that the world has been provided. It is because of that today we are able to connect. Yeah. The challenge which has happened over a period of time has been that unfortunately globally and in India, telecom operators have actually been at the suffering end, while the apps and the applications that run on the mobile network have made huge amounts of money. So I think it's been an unfair world where you see the WhatsApp, Facebook, Team, Microsoft Teams, Zoom actually being extremely profitable, whereas the telcos, and this is not just in India and global, have actually, which laid the infrastructure actually going through it. And that's one of the reasons why, countries like ours, particularly in South Asia, telecom operators have been pretty hesitant in putting it. I ran a circle, and I would tell you that, one of the things when you put a circle is you start looking at what is the sort of break-even cost that putting a tower in a village is. I ran in Tamil Nadu and Kerala, and I can tell you when you put a tower in a village, I've personally been through that experience where you bring that village to a particular level because exactly of what you said, access to, understanding patterns of crop, what happens can be done through various sources, telemedicine. You start opening access to that village. And I've seen that with my eyes, and I can tell you it's transformational. But companies have over a period of time been hesitant. And, again, the top 10% of homes, and many of us are fortunate to be in that league, we get access to a greater set of data than rest of the search. So the first thing, as far as education sector is, how do you bridge it? I can give you a personal, maybe a little anecdotal, but I can give you a personal instance. My mother stays in Kerala, though I've been born and brought up in Calcutta, now she stays in Kerala. And she called me one evening to say that, she wanted me to sponsor a couple of mobile handset for a couple of children. And when I inquired why, she started telling me that, in the school, one child actually committed suicide. It's such a shame, that a precious life was lost because suddenly in the school, everybody had to move into the digital world. And you can imagine for children who did not have access to a mobile handset, what that sort of implication was. So, that really taught me that, how privileged children who live in larger towns to families which have access are compared to a set of people. And the constant worry, thing in my mind is how can we, as an organization, the current organization I work for, as an individual, start contributing larger to the society to make sure that children can reach a particular level. Now, as far as this education sector is concerned, I think it's grown leaps and bounds. I mean, you are obviously reading a lot about it in media, so I won't get into the generic stuff. But what I can tell you is, the fact that having run the data business, to me, when I speak to some of my old colleagues in the firm at Airtel, obviously they are delighted because the adoption of data has almost gone multiple levels. It's almost 10x, 15x, and the cost of data versus actually, what you actually consume is where you start making good margins in the business. So I think what I really think is, I think institutions, the government, and also private enterprise, as well as individuals, And the reason I don't want to put everything on the government is, I've been reading a lot of stuff. I think as individuals, we also owe it back to the society. One of the reasons I chose to come back, I was doing a great job in Middle East Africa for AkzoNobel. And one of the reasons when this job came up, I decided to come back is to really start contributing back into the society in a meaningful manner. And I seriously mean it. I think, we've reached a stage in our life where I've been very fortunate to, with my parents who really, despite not really having the income to put me in one of the best schools in Calcutta, and really giving it back to the society is something. And this whole conversation about when my mother called to say, a child committed suicide for a lack of a handset and hence being unable to participate in a school, in an education event, really left a deep impression in my mind. So I think as far as the education sector is concerned, I do, when I speak to companies, to coaching classes, to companies which have Byju's, etc., they have grown multifold, primarily because the data consumption is available. But the key question that I ask myself is, what is the strata at which this is getting consumed? Is it getting consumed into homes where people have a certain level of income? How are you spreading it across? So that's one of the things that really, I think the focus now is upon, really saying, how are you spreading it across to the villages? How are you spreading it across to the, not just large towns and smaller towns, but really to where it matters? Are we really able to bridge society the way data is supposed to bridge? Not just by providing access to information, but by providing access to meaningful education. So, can a child who today is unable to get educated because of the fact that her parents or his parents have lost income, is able to quickly able to adopt? And the question is really, and to my mind, I think India is the country which generates huge amount of entrepreneurs. I personally have started getting into groups to share my experiences, and I can tell you, I'm in a couple of groups of startups where I'm really delighted to see young students from IITs, not just the best institutes, but across institutes, now wanting to adopt technology to help the country to sort of physically move. And to my mind, so while the government has to do its job, while the private enterprise has to do its job, I think it's people like us, it's the students of tomorrow who can quickly embrace and start, providing ingenious solutions to enable children to, across different divides of the society, to quickly bridge the gap. For me, the day when I start seeing, and we've seen it, not just IAS exams, but some of the best exams being taught by children who don't have that access. And it not just by fluke or by attending certain coaching classes, but by getting a platform to participate, I think is the day when this country will start moving strides, Mr. Ghosh.
No, thank you. And I, on that note, especially the entrepreneurship note, I'm sorely tempted to hand it over to one of the country's leading, entrepreneurs, Sairi. But before I do that, Sairi, if you just give us 30 more seconds, I've got to ask, Mr. Rajgopal one follow-up question, and that is, as the representative of global industry on this panel, and we've talked about we've talked about migrant workers, we've talked about SMEs, we've talked about shops and traders. We're now looking at, we've obviously looked at the banking and financial sector, the tech giants. Sorry, obviously Mr. Bhattacharya is there now, as I think we still, and pardon my, I'm sure I'm not the first person to do this. We look at her and we still think of State Bank of India, but and you've got to shift gears and say, oh, Salesforce. But I think, as another representative of global industry on this panel, what are your views about India and the way India's managed the crisis? What are your views about, business continuity, about, managing this risk as an outlook? And, I'd love your quick thoughts on that before we pivot to Saini.
Yeah. So thank you, Mr. Ghosh. So my view is, look, India has managed, and I think Mr. Hiranandani said it very well. I think the lockdown, one can always criticize. It's always easy to look at the rear side of the mirror and then say, talk about it or do arm side sort of, commentary. But I personally think that I keep asking myself, when you're in the position, what would you do? And if the answer is different, then I think the lockdown was great. I think only a couple of things on the lockdown. I think and we've talked about it, but I think the movement of migrant laborers could have been handled better. I personally witnessed in Gurgaon, where I stay, a lot of people who actually couldn't even find a bus to go to nearby places in UP and MP, and organizations like us and individuals were stepping in to try and provide them some money so that they could reach home. For people we don't even really know, but you could see it. And I think that should have been sort of handled a little better. Yeah. But on the whole, I personally think after that, what has happened is most of the state and the center started getting their acts together. However, I think the only challenge has been that the local authorities, while they've done a splendid job, somewhere the balance of empowerment shifted a bit, and hence a couple of local lockdowns have created some issues in terms of market continuity, in terms of making sure continuity of businesses sort of managed very well. I would still think that the challenge has been that our medical infrastructure has not been of the size and scale to be able to manage this sort of a pandemic. Those who could afford and those who are thankful and who can sort of afford it have been able to manage it, but particularly people who are in the lower income groups have really struggled even to get a hospital, and I've witnessed some of these things in front of my eyes. So I think that could have been managed a little better. While I personally think the testing has been, if you look at the numbers, at one time we were below Pakistan. So Pakistan does roughly about 10, 12, now 15,000 tests a day. We were even below Pakistan, but now we've gone to almost 70,000, a lakh, few lakhs a day, right? So to my mind, that has a job well done. The availability of kits, etc., is very good. And you can see the recovery rates in many states is even upwards of 80, 85%. So that is good. But I still think that we could have managed, particularly the elderly people who really required that protection a little better. And that I wish that, there was a little more of a structured, organized manner in which between the government and the enterprise, we could have done a better job of. Yeah. But as I say, it's easy to say it in hindsight. When you're on the job, it's tough. My belief is, look, again, I would go back to what Mr. Bagchi said. We are seeing a good recovery. Yeah. Now, I do not know. I'm seeing various alphabets, V, W, K. I'm not let me be honest, I'm not an economist. And I think some of the other panelists are far better entrenched. But if you personally ask me, my intuitive feel, having worked in different countries, is I think India will have one of the sharpest recoveries if everything is done well, if the vaccine comes on time early next year, if the availability of that vaccine is not limited to the upper strata of the society or the middle and upper strata of the society, but across strata of society, where we owe it to the right set of people, particularly people who've given their lives to make sure that our lives are saved, particularly in the hospital, and people who are able to, sanitary workers, a lot of women. Yeah. So I think that is critical. To me, I just want to also just mention the topic today is about women empowerment. And to me, the success of a country, let me just take two examples. I mean, you look at what New Zealand has done, look at what Germany has done. Now, it may be coincidental, but I don't think these things are coincidental. I think both Angela Merkel and Jacinta have done a brilliant job of being able to manage. Why? I personally believe that ladies have a higher sense of intuitive power and empathy. Yeah, so resilience is great, and when I run organization, I can tell you, I think both men and women can show a high amount of resilience, but I think empathy and the ability to be intuitive and know what to do across the different strata of the society is a critical success factor for India as we start moving ahead. Yeah. On a personal note, in my current organization, AkzoNobel, we are you were very kind in saying we are a global leader. We are a midget in India, as you know, because one of our competitors has a 50% market share. So one of the things I keep telling my team is, what are we doing differently, and how are we really embedded to the society in which we operate? And one of the things we've done is we are the first company that have got 100 women painters in Delhi. This started when I started getting my home painted after joining the organization. My wife turned around and said, why do I see all men? When I speak on the colors and I speak to the interior designer, it's all women. But when the people come home, why is it all men? So we decided, that thought sort of stayed in my mind, and my team has done an immaculate job of getting 100 women painters done. We did it in the month of Jan-Feb. Unfortunately, COVID then hit us in the month of March. We made sure all the 100 women who are painters in Delhi are protected. And as the season starts, as work has started coming in, that's something that we want to carry in. We truly want to see women empowerment in an organization today where we have the same challenge. A large percentage of the organizations run by males, one of the things that we are openly sort of now pushing forward is that for any role, we must have a woman. Because, this thought of saying, no, women can't do a factory job, women can't do a sales job, to my mind is dated. I've worked in parts of the country where everything is open. Today, we have got a lot of women in our factories. We've got a few sales colleagues. Yeah, we've got to make sure that they're treated well. They're treated in a manner where they can help to become the evangelists and recruit more. So to my mind, to the last part of the question that you asked, for India to start really shaping well, I think the topic is absolutely apt of saying, how can we create a society where women can play a much, much higher role in trying to bridge the gap? And to my mind, that is the success of this country. The Prime Minister has read it right. But I would only say that not to leave it only to the marriageable age, but to much bigger causes in the country, where if we can start sponsoring girl children to get educated across the critical states, make sure that we are able to make their lives meaningful, make sure they are able to get the right platforms and opportunities to do it, pretty much like many people who are privileged, I think there will come an India of tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sari Chahal, I've got a problem calling you Mrs. Chahal, sorry. But I know Sari a bit too well. So, but Ms. Chahal, so you've been set up on two fronts. One is as somebody who's actually done an amazing job of making India proud for using technology for social good. Would you tell us a bit more about how the pandemic has affected the million women that you work with day in and day out? And what's your vision for tech entrepreneurs, for women entrepreneurs who are wanting to help lead the country out of chaos?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. And I think it's amazing to listen to my co-panelists. So look, I think just to give everyone a very quick introduction of what we do. So we're really using two metrics here. One is that India has one of the biggest gender gaps that exist in the world. We are one of the lowest on the WF ranking every year, but we are also a country with 600 million people on the internet. And I think 5 years ago when I started my company, there were barely 10 million women online, and that number officially as of last December 19 was 270 million women connected to a device. And although all of may not be connected to all devices, even if we half it, that's about 120 million women connected to the internet. And I think what it does is it breaks the barrier of mobility in a very different fashion. It takes away the challenges of physical travel. It takes away a lot of social barriers that have existed and opens up a lot of opportunities. So what we are really building is a women-only social network. There are about 21 million women on our network today. And when they come to Shiro's, they become part of this safe space, and women-only communities have done extremely well in India. And we're taking a page from the offline playbook and bringing it online. And when they become part of this community, they have access to peers, they have access to resources, they have access to a helpline that we run, they have access to opportunities, micro-entrepreneurship, and a space to express themselves. So that's something we do. And I think the pandemic gave us two very different and somewhat divergent trends. So the one trend that we clearly saw was that the pandemic took away a lot of freedom women had earned for themselves. A lot of women lost their jobs, and I think that's been damaging. We run a helpline. It's a free counseling helpline on our app. The cases for domestic abuse and violence went up drastically, and we also saw a lot more anxiety and a lot more ask for help, that went up. But on the other hand, we run a business line which is around remote work. And we started this business line almost 3 years ago. And to be honest, it was the ugly duckling, in the family. Basically, it was hard to sell remote work, And what the remote work line does is it certifies women to work from home and to start, getting connected to corporate workforce via remote. And we do a lot of heavy lifting in terms of managing expectation, the platform, all of that. And what we are seeing is that business is the fastest growing business line today. And it's kind of, so what used to be employment for 10,000 women, I think by end of this year will be 100,000 women on one platform. The other trend that's very, very visible in this post-pandemic world is just acceleration of adoption of technology. So I think a lot of people, even though they've had access to, let's say, smartphones and internet, were really not using it. And I think that trend has clearly accelerated. The other trend that's happened is because of the economic situation, and I think the need for double incomes. We all know people, WhatsApp groups and around us who are, selling what they sell and make what they make, whether it's food or clothes, the non-GST businesses. And I think this trend will sort of add to something that I want to share. I think there are three pillars on which we feel women can become part of the economic mainstream and also add to, the economy that we dream of becoming. One is obviously education. Second is employment and entrepreneurship. And third is capital, access to credit and all its avatars, right? From sachet avatars to, $1 billion checks. And I think just to give you some very broad numbers, it's given that there are about 14 million to 16 million women who run a micro enterprise today, which means they're either solopreneurs or they run an outfit that generates income. And these 16 million women employ anywhere between 22 million to 27 million additional hands, and these are direct employment. And some estimates say next 3 to 4 years, if this number of 16 million is doubled, these 16 million women who can become micro entrepreneurs will end up employing about 60 million people directly, almost 100 million people indirectly. So I think what we're really sitting on is a direct employment opportunity, an employment and income opportunity for almost 150 million people here, if women start becoming part of the economic mainstream. And I think as technology accelerates, as our digital payment stack gets deeper, as we see some of the things around account aggregators, around the insurance stack, around a whole lot of work that's been done to bring lives of people online, I think women stand to benefit from it the most, because it takes away a lot of social barriers, the barrier of leaving one's home, the barrier of having to have a conversation with a family member around something that they want to do, or the barrier of being online and having a business without really sort of, rubbing too many, people off. There is an immense potential. Here is a company, we stand at about 21 million women in our network. We offer a safe space, a community, but we also offer employment, entrepreneurship, and now we're beginning to dabble into microcredit for the urban entrepreneurs. You see, there's I think the pandemic didn't induce anything new. It just accentuated what existed. So while there were glaring gaps that existed, there was also a lot of potential that existed. And I think it's uncovered a lot of that. So next few years, are going to be very, very significant in terms of, things we might see, in terms of women's participation in the economic mainstream. And I think it will reflect in many other things. It will reflect in our education. It will reflect in our, I think, overall ethos as a society. And of course, I think, sir, it will also reflect in the empathy that we have as a country. So so very, very excited by this.
No, I think that's extremely helpful, and definitely, it shifts the focus and gives us an idea of the scale of change that's possible, which is simply staggering. So we do have a number of questions that are coming in. There's one that's just come in. While women empowerment has been seeping into awareness of people in urban areas, how can one facilitate awareness and internalization of this in rural communities? Sure. Mr. Bagchi's asked if he could take this up. Absolutely. But what I'd request is, before Mr. Bagchi, you come in, Sairi, do you have any quick thoughts on this as well?
So I have to tell you, I think what's happening is the internet's blurring some of these boundaries. It's really blurring boundaries. When I started my company, we were very metro focused. There was a clear demographic demarcation, and I think as we see more and more reports around internet adoption, we see that actually the rural adoption is way faster, way deeper, because the need is very, very real. Rural consumers are not using the internet for gaming and ordering food. They're really using it for, very, very significant services around healthcare and, livelihood. So we know that. And I think with women, the fact is the pandemic kind of accelerated this trend in a big way. We still have gaps around, affordability, around access, around data packs, around just the, the hierarchical order in a home where, the woman gets like the poorest device or sometimes no device, and there's a family owned device. But look, I think this is an unstoppable trend. Anybody who has tasted freedom will never go back. And I think the pandemic kind of got all of us to, taste it deeply. And it also kind of made it very real in our lives. It's not something that's a vanity need anymore. And look, I think what we are doing as a country, we're also building an India digital stack, in some ways. So when a lot more of what we do in our daily core life area becomes digital, then I think the adoption is very, very likely to happen. Of course, I think there are some tactical things that can be done around, cheap device loans, for example, distributed through the Anganwadi network or the local panchayat networks, cheaper access to data, more access for women compared to other groups, because I think when a woman gets a device, it affects her entire family. It sort of changes the whole equation, and I think we're on our way there. I'm definitely sort of putting my bet on that.
Thank you, Mr. Bagchi, to bring you in with your thoughts, please.
No, I think I'll just pick up from where Sari left, and that has been our experience as well. One is certainly on the ICICI Foundation side, we work very, very deeply on the rural side. And on the rural side, we have seen that they require essentially three linkages. They require a skill linkage, they require a credit linkage, and they require market linkage. And if you give these three to them, they do very, 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 very well. And I'm talking of women entrepreneurs more than the others. Third is the data and the connectivity that has come in essentially has democratized information and knowledge. And once you democratize information more than knowledge is more skill based, essentially the risk of either getting cheated or the risk of not knowing what's happening, goes down. And that also empowers, because you then deal with people armed with information. And that also brings in a newfound confidence. What we are seeing in villages is that it is now having impact on the social fabric of the families, wherein extra income is coming because of these. When extra income comes onto the family, actually the equilibrium gets disturbed in a way, because it pushes back the normal equilibrium that we have in the villages of, I must say, a bit of a male domination, a bit of all of it. The positive thing that we see is that as woman brings in money into the family, it has deep impact into the education of the family. And they then invest most in their children and education. And that then over a period of time, we feel that is very, very transformational. So we are also getting a study done on it. But, we are getting this, and it is not a noise, it is a very, very clear signal that linking up these three is critical. That is skill linkage, market linkage, and credit linkage. Getting the money into, even if it is 2,000 rupees per month, 3,000 rupees per month, it's a big additional income. It gives freedom. Freedom essentially means it goes back to children and its education. And that is creating a lot of transformation that is there. We have also seen that they say in the general panchayat also increases as the economic freedom comes in. So I feel that, and so I completely 150% agree with Sherry that digital and tech has transformation beyond what we can imagine, and it is a force where there is absolutely no U-turn. The other thing that we see is that they are quite connected with each other once they have digital, and once they are connected with each other, the information flows quite seamlessly, and there is a collective power that comes in, and that is also transformational to the society. So all in all, I feel that, in the semi-urban and rural areas, the impact is deeper and impact is large. But because they are geographically spread out, you don't see the impact at a network basis so quickly. But it is certainly coming back in a network impact. And I feel that these three farm bills that have come out, the change in farm bills, I would say that this is the 1991 of in the farming sector and in the agri sector. And here you will see a lot of micro entrepreneurship coming in, because the whole agri chain will get transformed. And when agri chain gets transformed, you will see a lot of small industries, very micro entrepreneurship coming out. When this transformation happens, we feel that in 2 to 3 years we should be looking at a big change in this value chain. So I completely agree with Mr. L that data tech is very transformative. Empowerment is extremely transformative, and it is most transformative when women get empowered. It is most transformative for the societies. So
absolutely. Absolutely. Can I call upon Mrs. Bhattacharya, please, and Mr. Rajgopal thereafter? But Mrs. Bhattacharya, I'm looking at a question that, well, three questions. One which Abhijit Banerjee's written, and he's talked about. Well, the first question that catches my attention is one that somebody called Shukriyo has written, and he's turned around and talked about the drop in the number of women coming into the workforce in India. The second question is a question that Abhijit's talked about in terms of retaining mid-career women given the rise of family responsibilities. And the third is, the one by Ashok Mukherjee, who said, how can organizations attract more female talent? As a woman leader, or rather as a leader who is a woman and a woman who's held, the highest levels of employment in multiple organizations, what are your views on all three questions, please?
So I think, all of these three things are actual, and all of these trends are very worrying. So if I take the last one first, as to how to bring more women into the workspace, I think I agree with Sari that technology is one of the answers. And while the pandemic itself, we are actually seeing that a lot many women from the middle class families are actually giving up jobs during this period, because much of the housework that used to be done by part-time workers, they have been stopped from coming in for fear of infections, and that work has fallen on the women of the house. So they are unable to manage both office and housework, even though it's all from home. It's just become too much for some of them. But as the pandemic recedes, what it will do is it will empower a lot of people who are not able to step away from home to actually become part of the workforce. Because one thing that companies have learned is that, you do not need to worry about productivity if people are working from home. I remember back in 2015 when I was trying to create a work from home platform for women in SBI, there was a lot of pushback, not only from the men, but also from the women themselves, because there was a feeling that if you allow some people to work from home, then they will slack off, they will actually not produce enough. All of that, I think, has been put to rest. There are very many ways of assessing productivity, and you don't need to have somebody physically looking over your shoulder to make sure that you're doing your job. As a result of this, actually, a lot of women who can't step out of the house, but who are absolutely well qualified to do a job, will actually be able to rejoin the workforce. However, as I said, currently that may not be the situation, but that's how it's going to happen going forward. The second thing is, how do we ensure more people get into the workforce? I think, given the way things are right now, we need to encourage more and more STEM education amongst girls. I think this is one of the key things that we really need to do. Girls today, first of all, they are falling behind in education itself. Sari was talking about the fact that, today a lot of women don't even have phones. Now, first and foremost, it's the haves that have the phones. And if you're looking at education, there are already a number of people who are behind. These people, during this 1 year, are not getting educational inputs because they don't have means of access. And even in this class of have-nots, the people who have access are rather the boys than the girls. So, girls suffer even more. Now, as a result of this, what happens is they are already behind, and yet you want to get them ahead. And STEM education is something, which if it doesn't have a good foundation, it's something that's very difficult to take forward. People traditionally have felt that women don't have the abilities to really, be in the STEM fields. And that is more, I think, a perception than anything else. So we need to work a lot more to ensure that there is far more STEM education amongst girls. That, I think, is very important. As for people leaving the workforce midstream, I think there are very many situations in India which are not exactly similar in the rest of the world. One situation, of course, is that, women still are the primary caregivers over here, and especially for children, and especially in urban homes, when children are from class 10 to class 12, that's the time when there is a lot of competition to not only train the kids for the examinations that they have to provide, but also for the competitive examinations in order to become an engineer or a doctor or whatever you want to be. There are competitive exams now even for becoming lawyers. So there are competitive exams everywhere. So wherever you need to be. And somehow or the other, the feeling is that it is the mother who has to provide this support. So chauffeur the child around to the coaching classes, ensure that he or she gets their complan at night and wakes up early in the morning. So it's all the mother's responsibility. And in case the child is not able to make it and the mother has not been around to provide this support, the mother will be made to feel guilty by everybody around her. So, when I saw this, that was one instance. The other instance was elderly care, whether it be for parents and parents-in-laws. As you know, hospital care or nursing home care is very, very expensive in India. People prefer to have such older people at home. And in fact, older people themselves prefer to stay on at home rather than be cared for by people they don't know. And there again, the primary care responsibility falls on the woman of the house. And it's impossible for them, they get torn between loyalties of not being able to do their job very well and not being able to look after their elderly relatives very well. And as a result, ultimately, they give up their jobs. So, that's one of the reasons SBI has a 2-year sabbatical, specially meant for women and especially for child and elderly care. However, having said that, one of our IIM professors did point out to me that maybe by doing this, I was creating further stereotypes. I agree that, that there is an element of them thinking that, yes, this is their role. But till such time as people realize otherwise, I thought this was a more practical way of ensuring that people can return to their careers. And actually speaking, I can tell you, even in the first year, 670 people actually opted for this sabbatical, and most of them were able to come back to their careers. So I think, we have to find specific solutions for specific India problems. The solutions that apply elsewhere will not apply here. We have to find specific solutions. Women participation in schooling in the villages had increased greatly because they were being given cycles. In some of the states, they were being given a lump sum if they continued on to college. So I think all of those schemes, including now, instead of cycles, I think everybody should be given iPads. If something like that actually happens, I think, women education will definitely improve, and we will be able to see more and more women coming back into the workstream.
Thank you. I just noticed that we're way over time, and I think the beauty is with panelists like yourselves and with a topic like this, we can just keep talking, and what we're missing perhaps is in true Bengali fashion, the chai and the samosas or the what have you, but it's been a delight, and I really respect all of you for your time and your inputs. And I think the fact is we traversed a lot of ground. We started obviously talking about urban planning, building cities, migrant workers, went through SMEs, looked at the bottom of the trader community, and which is the heart of the economic engine of a country like ourselves, and then traverse slowly over time through entrepreneurship and women and children to building back better, right? In a sense, when we're looking at everything that we can do together to try and build this, build our way out of this pandemic together. Mission Swayam Siddha is all about building, self-reliance, building independence. I'm proud to say that as part of the mission, PBWA has actually supported more than 200 women so far, and we hope to continue to do more and more such initiatives in support of women, in support of families, in support of India, and we'll look forward to your support at every step of the journey as we move forward. So on that note, I'm going to wish you all a Sharad Shubhitcha, well, all our best appreciation, and hand it over back to Saurabh Mitro to deliver a vote of thanks.
Thank you, Sukanti. It has been a fascinating discussion, and that's why we have, we have gone beyond our time. But I thank you, all of you, once again, and from Powai Bengali Welfare Association, I wish all of you and your family Sharad Shubhitcha. Namaskar.
For sure.
Thank you, sir.
No, but thank you. I think that was a fabulous discussion, a fabulous program, and thank you sincerely. It was a pleasure being connected with everybody again, all the way from Houston.
Thank you. Good day. Bye-bye.
Super.
Thank
Thank you so much.
Thank you.